How do I start
I
it?
would say try not to do the cheesy.
I don't.
Hey,
I know. I really wanted to, and then I stopped myself. But like, I don't want to be. I don't want to. You know, I don't want to make it weird.
Yeah.
But I do think it's something that needs to be said.
Yes.
Well, do you want me to go or do you want to talk?
No, you. You do it once. If it's not there, we can.
Well, we can have a back and forth too.
Yeah, but like getting it started.
Right. So I do think it's something that needs to be said. We recorded an episode for Kingdom Empowered, where we talked about friendship, right? Healthy friendships, unhealthy friendships, a whole bunch of things inside of that. And here in my basement currently, we have a lot of stuff going on, and we have a certain level of production value that we really like to achieve, right? We want the audio to sound great. We want the video to be as high of a quality as we can. And that's just something that we want to put out into the world, right? However, Cory and I, we started this podcast from the notion that we're not perfect, right? We're normal human beings. We're not pastors. We're not theologians. We're not anything special. We're just normal guys who love Jesus, who want to talk about it, right? And so on that episode, the quality was not where we wanted it to be. But we're deciding to put it out anyway for one very important reason. And I think it is that Cory and I honestly got a ton just having the conversation. It was really, really good for us. And there were actually 2 other people in the room while we were recording, and they enjoyed it a lot as well. And so even though the quality isn't where we want it, we're going to put it out there. And obviously always striving for the best. But yeah. Anything else to add?
I think just calling out is too. It's like it's about being genuine. And we had the conversation like, should we re-record? Should we do it and like try to like do all these like things to try to fix the production value? But really, it's like what matters is us being genuine and the conversations we actually have,
right,
and sharing those. And so I think while you could say like the quality of the recording isn't to a standard that we want, like we believe in the quality of the conversation.
Yes.
So
that's so good. So we hope you enjoy it. Here we go.
How do you build friendships?
Right.
And a big part of how we have built a friendship is through like the acts of like investing in time to have like a longer conversation.
Mm-hmm. Be like there's a safety in the relationship. There's a safety of it, of where you can be vulnerable and you can go deeper and you can feel safe enough to be vulnerable.
Have you experienced like a friend in a group or whatever that you have found to actually be like what you would say is like unhealthy for you to be around? Like, how do you deal with that reality if it comes up in your friend circle?
Hey man, you want to talk about God? Aussie has come to start calling me his best friend.
Oh.
And it is adorable.
Yeah?
And incredible. And also I feel like a really, really big responsibility. And I tell him, you're my best friend. And then I feel bad because I have another son. And I don't want him to like feel left out, but he's not quite old enough to understand yet.
Yeah, but I mean, this thing too is like, even in the hierarchy of that, like, it's like, do you have to have one best friend? You're my best friends,
right?
I got best friends,
right? Well, I think that then we get into the semantics of the word best, because does it imply one or many? Like you can't have multiple goats.
Yeah, they're not
like the greatest of all time. Like there has to be one.
Really, I have driven by more First Churches of Christ than I've ever. That's true.
First Churches of Christ, First Baptist Church.
I was like, in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Holy cow!
Right.
I would have thought.
Okay, have you ever?
Corinth,
this is
whatever.
A serious question. Have you ever seen a second a second Baptist church or like a second Church of Christ?
Yeah. No.
Because no, nobody wants to be second.
Yeah.
If you're not first, you're last. Right?
Ninth Church of Christ.
Right. Like, what is it?
It's a small but mighty congregation of believers.
But I feel like this conversation of friendship,
Yeah.
best friends, I feel like it's something that we should dive into.
Yeah.
And I feel like I don't know what episode number this is that we're recording this podcast, but you are one of my best friends, right?
Thanks, man.
As
I
long
wish
as
I could say the same thing about you.
wow, just
Okay.
cut me in my heart, please. No, assuming that you can have more than one best friend,
Mhm.
right? But we have had conversations like what we have on the podcast for years now. Most of them obviously have occurred like at 2:00 in the morning, not in a recording
Sure.
session, right? But now, and I think what's really special about this is that when we've been having those conversations at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever it is, they are fewer and far between than I ever wanted them to be. Right? I always wanted
Sure.
them to be much more consistent, much more constant, all the time, kind of thing. And now that we're being intentional and we're doing this podcast, now we are being intentional. We get to do them much more. We're just recording it for other people.
I did have this conversation with Abby Grace today, and I was talking about specifically how I responded to a scenario, and I was like, I don't think that if I wasn't in a place where I was having these conversations with Taylor as often as I am, and like really digging and talking about the heart of God and how that can impact our life, I don't know that I would respond the same way. And I also said, it's like, I feel like I'm closer to Taylor now than I've ever been, because these are the conversations that I think. So we go here too. It's like, how do you build friendships?
Right.
And a big part of how we have built a friendship is through like the acts of like investing in time to have like a longer conversation. Sometimes when everything else is still, why do you talk it with people that you're close with late at night? It's like sometimes because that's like the rest of the world is still, all the distractions are gone, and you can actually just connect with that person one-on-one.
Particularly now that both of us have children.
Sure.
Right? Of like they've gone down to bed. Most of the time, I would say that our wives go to bed before we do as well.
Sure.
And so that just gives us this time of where I think it's also this thing of where like there's not the stress of like the day. Like work and doing all these different things. Like there's stress there just inherently. And
yeah, it's not even just stress, it's just things that get put in front of your face that you have to deal with.
Exactly.
Right away. They're immediate.
I think that something that makes it like it's really awesome to have like these deeper conversations. I think it's more awesome that they happen about God and how it's this journey and this path that both of us are going down. Obviously, we grew up in different situations, different circumstances, all that kind of stuff. But the fact that we can sit here, and I think one of the things that I appreciate the most about our friendship, now we're just like, now I love you, man, right? That's all we're doing, is that there's like this intense listening. And I also think that one of the things I've always really valued about our friendship is that I don't feel like there's ever been this feeling of you're better than me, or I'm better than you, or I know more than you, or you know more than me.
Yeah.
It's always been this very like equal footing. And when you're going through something, I can stand there and stand with you and be there, right? But on the flip side, when I'm going through something, it's the exact same thing. And there's no interruption. There's no like ripple. Like there's no it automatically, as I like to say, it just flips.
Yeah.
And it's never like I'm in this relationship as a mentor mentee, or I'm in this as like a higher and a lower. It's very much so. It depends on the day. It depends on what's going on. Depends on what happens. And as we've gotten deeper into this, I have obviously grown to love it and enjoy it even more. And I do feel like our relationship is at a really, probably the best place it's ever been in. And I think I would love to get into this later. So keep this in mind.
Cool. I'll lock it in.
But that doesn't mean that this relationship is perfect.
Sure.
and we still have real conversations, and
Yeah.
there are still things that we can fix and make better.
Yeah.
Right. But I feel like it's in this really good place. And I think that, you know, as we go through this and kind of what we want to talk about is not just about us and not just this thing of like, oh man, I love you, and you like responding, like,
Sure.
what does that look like, and how do you build that, and what does a toxic relationship look like, and how do you navigate through that, right?
Mhm.
And how do you build a friendship that you can A, rely on, and B, sit in and like feel great about, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think so. We like, just to kind of like start, I think you look at the beginning of relationships. Like,
Mhm.
what is the thing? And I think if I'm being honest, like, and I brought the scripture up, I think in an episode before, but like in Proverbs, it says like, he who has friends is himself friendly.
Mm.
And so I think there is something that you notice when you go into a room and you don't know everybody.
Mm.
Because that's how all relationships start. It's like, I didn't know you at one point, and then something happened where there is like a connection. There's like a spark. I think a word that we sometimes feels weird to say, but it's like, I think is okay to say, is like, there's an attraction there. Literally, I mean, the first time I met Matt, when he walked into, we were going to play on this worship team together, no idea who he was. And there was something about him. I was like, this is weird. Why is it weird to say? Like, I was attracted to that guy. Not like in a physical sense, but like there was something about his spirit.
Right.
And then I go through, I was like, who is this dude? And then I saw him play, and I was like,
He's a really good drummer.
and like, I was just like, I felt whatever the thing was
Right.
that makes us friends today. Like, I could feel the heartbeat of that
Right.
immediately.
Right.
And the same for you.
You know, I was thinking, and I think that our relationship, our friendship, we
Wow.
didn't actually start it,
Correct. That's actually true.
right?
Our wives.
It was our wives.
Yeah.
Our wives connected on another level
Yes.
very quickly,
Yeah.
in my opinion, because we were both trying to have children.
Yeah. I think, but there are things that happen that like both parties don't always see, because from my experience though, the first time I visited Amplify Church, and I was kind of in a weird place of coming, like skeptical in some ways. And I remember a friend that I worked with invited us down, and he was like, we're to save you seats. And like, so do you mind being in the front row? I was like, I don't mind being in the front row. And Brooke was right there. And then I think you were like doing stuff like serving, but you came down. And if I was being honest, like my first impression of you did not happen at John Vecchio's basement. It was watching you praise. And there was something in watching you in the service go through and lift your hand. And I was like, immediately, this is like before we ever interacted, seeing something be like, that guy's got an energy that I'm attracted to.
I don't remember that at all. Like, I don't remember that day or like that.
We
happening.
you and Brooke sat next to each other, like right on the aisle in the front row.
Yeah.
And I remember vividly Josh Clear walking up in like some weird camo pants and a trench coat. And I was like, what the heck kind of church is this thing?
Right.
But there was something that I would say for me, like before, like, yes, Abby and Brooke got close and started to have a relationship, and that led to us hanging out as a couple.
Right.
But there was something intrinsically that was like about you that I was like, that dude's special. Like, I think that I would get along with him. So I think that goes back to, I guess, this idea of like, there is a spark in people that happens through through romantic relationships, but I would say primarily also in friendships, where you see something about, and they have a quality, they have an energy, they have a vibe, they have something that they're bringing to the room that makes you feel good, and you want to be a part of it, or you feel like that's how I feel. Right. I lift my hands too. Is that cool? Like, oh, like, I don't know. So I think it's about like all those sparks happen. Yeah. And then what do you do after that? Yeah.
I think like it's really weird because this is slightly off topic, and if I don't want to get too far off topic, but it's not. I don't know. It's this thing of I have said this to people, and it has been said to me of particular in any situation, is that it only takes one person to do something that could be like out of a comfort zone to unlock something for a whole lot of other people.
Yeah.
And I've talked to people a lot and been talked to a lot about specifically that in worship and praise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of like, if I go to church and I sit in the front row and I worship unashamed.
Yeah.
And I have my time with the Lord of like, the thing is I don't remember that Sunday.
Yeah.
Because honestly, I probably wasn't concerned at all with you or what you were doing. Yeah. I'm going to do me. Right.
I mean, we talked.
Right.
Sure.
You probably said hi. Like, what's up, dude?
I work for Lenovo. I work at Apple.
No. I don't remember that at all. I mean, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I'm not going to hold it against you.
You probably will. No. But there's this thing of being yourself and unlocking something in other people, right? It's not just for you. And it's amazing how much other people watch what you're doing. And I think that's something that a lot of times people are scared of.
Yeah.
They're like, oh my gosh, people are watching me. But in reality, there's a whole lot of people who are watching you going, I want to do that, or I want to be a part of that. Right.
Yeah.
And I think what's so crazy is, you know, our relationship, our friendship has had ups and downs too, of where there have been times where we were super close, and there have been times where we haven't talked for a couple of weeks. I don't know, months or, a month or two, like at a time over the last couple of years. And it's been this up and down thing, but there's always, I feel like it always comes back to this thing of, honestly, this goes with the same thing of like you using the word attraction, right? Of like, I love you and I know you love me. Mm-hmm. And like, what else matters? Mm-hmm. And I think that that's really, really special. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with is, and like, this is a weird thing to talk about because I don't want anybody out there listening to be like, oh, Taylor and Cory are just like bragging or being like, look at us. Like, we have this and you want it. But this is something that I wanted for a very long time. Right. And now I feel like I have it, and I want to have a conversation about how it happened and what we do. And I also want to have a conversation of like, both of us probably, I don't want to speak for you, but have been in very toxic relationships or relationships that weren't good for us or didn't have an outcome that has resulted in this. And what advice would we give to those people? And I don't even know where to start with that because it's such a topic.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we can start with like and this has nothing to do with us, but like talking about friendship as a whole. Mm-hmm. And like, what does that look like? What does a healthy friendship actually look like? Like, what should you expect to see from that relationship?
Yeah.
Because this is something I think I grew up with a lot. You hear a lot, like, you have a few friends, you have a lot of acquaintances. Mm-hmm. And I think in general that holds true. Mm-hmm. And that's not to diminish the value of acquaintances, but to say like, what does it mean to be a friend to somebody? Mm-hmm. What does the scripture say about that? Mm-hmm. And I guess like, how do we judge that relationship, whether it's healthy or not?
Yeah.
This is like further down, but like the scripture that always gets thrown out, I think, about friendship is in Proverbs about iron sharpening iron.
Yes.
And we can talk a lot about that. And I think that there's a lot to say, but I think it's important to note the fact that too is like nothing gives me more life and can inspire me the way like you can, like a healthy friendship, a good friend. And at the same time, a bad friend can really cause some freaking destruction.
Well, that's the thing is, I feel like iron sharpens iron is always talked about in a very positive light.
Yeah.
But it works both ways.
Right.
It can bring you down and it can take you up.
Yeah. And even that statement, like iron sharpens iron. It's not iron polishes iron, which means like kind of like where like I have the best relationships that I have as friends. Like these are not people that tell me what I want to hear all the time. They don't enable me all the time. They don't say, "Oh, Cory, yeah, that's your idea. Go ahead, do it.
Right.
That's what your flesh wants to do. Go do that."
Right.
Like those are the people that hold me accountable, whether it's my physical health, whether it's how I treat somebody, how I respond to my wife in a certain way, my commitment to being in a fellowship of believers.
Right.
So this idea of sharpening only happens through friction. And like friction causes like that can only happen if there are two things kind of rubbing against each other.
What is friction in a relationship?
I think it's honesty. I think it's you gave a face.
No, as in like that's really real.
Like it is. Like it's sitting across from somebody and talking to them and having me sharing something. Maybe it's a version of the story I said and like giving a little bit of a candy coated version of it. And somebody like, nah, I'm not going to accept that. Not in those words, but like, I'm going to push you to really go deeper. Right. And like, we've been a part of a gathering, like a group of dudes that have gotten together for the last 2 years. And the core of what it was it was the first time that I had ever experienced a room of men, not in a church setting or anything like that. We're just out. But one being vulnerable, but then if you tried to give like a candy version of your vulnerability, you were called out. You were called out. You were pushed. Like it was always, we're going to go a little deeper. Right. And at some point, like that can become like weird too. But ultimately, like I had never experienced like you can be vulnerable and you're going to receive accountability with love. Right. With the purpose of that friction is to become sharper. Right. Not to break you. Right. The purpose of a friend saying like, hey, you need to actually like, what's the root of that? Right. Like this was the behavior. Yeah, that's one thing. But what was the root of it? Right. And we got to talk about it. And I'm not trying to like traumatize you or make you feel bad or feel down, but it's like you need to be able to identify the root cause of that thing. Right. In order to address it and cut that out of your life. Like it's in love. Because otherwise, if we just pull leaves off the tree, right, the leaves grow back. The thorns, or whatever it is, like you have to get down to like, or weeds would probably be a better thing. If we pull the top of a weed, like it's gonna come back. Like you have to like my dad, or not my dad, but like an adult male would tell you like, don't take the easy way out. Dig down, get the root out. Right. You are also my dad didn't pull weeds. I don't think. Right. I would actually like I would coin a phrase over what you're talking right now, and I would be like, there's a safety in the relationship. There's a safety of where you can be vulnerable and you can go deeper and you can feel safe enough to be vulnerable. Well, yeah, because what stops us from being vulnerable? Our own ego, fear, insecurity, fear of being cast aside. Yeah, changing things. Our relationship will change if I'm honest with you. Right. Sorry. Go ahead. No. Yeah. Keep going. I mean, that's all of those things come into play, and I think that I think one thing that's really, really, really interesting about that iron sharpens iron. Okay. And I personally think that this is something that I've missed in certain relationships in my own life, and I would probably say other people miss in relationships if you're looking for something, right? Is the verse in what everybody is, iron sharpens iron. Okay. And let's just keep in mind, right, that it is not a grindstone sharpens iron. Okay. Here's what I mean by this is iron sharpening iron is a two-way street. That's good. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's not one thing acting on another thing. It's two things acting on each other. Yeah. Right. And so our relationship could be completely different. Just to like give an example of like, you gave this story of seeing me be in the front row, worshiping, doing whatever. And you were like, that dude's got a vibe. Like, it's cool. Maybe I want to I see myself in that. Right. Like it would be cool to get to know him or whatever it was. Right. But there had to be a choice to actually do that. Mm-hmm. You could have had that thought, and then we could have kept going to the same church for years and never developed a relationship. You know what I mean? I think that a very big thing is, and this is for a romantic relationship or for like you
give me those eyebrows, dude. Those were some large eyebrows, dude. I think for like a romantic relationship, I also think for, you know, what you were talking about earlier of a couple of close friends versus acquaintances of there has to be action, there has to be pursuit, and there has to be like choices made by both sides to be able to develop something very deeply. And I feel like it is this thing of like pursuing and going after and seeking out on both sides. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people. It's really hard for me. I mean, just to like dig into this weird thing for a minute, like I think that growing up, particularly through, I would probably say high school and college, I had a lot of great friends. I don't think I had any best friends. And I think it's because I had walls up that I did not put down. And I would not be vulnerable with people.
What were the what were the walls? What was the source of those?
There were a lot of things in that time. Like my parents getting divorced, I had gone through a lot of weird things. And I love my parents and I have a great relationship with both my mom and my dad today. But I had to go to therapy for this. There was a big thing of, I felt like my parents had betrayed my trust. And so then it became very, very hard for me to trust people in general, because my parents, my mom, my dad, who I looked up to, I felt like they had broken my heart in that moment of why is this happening? What? And I also went through this thing of like, as a child, going through that of saying it was my fault.
Yeah.
And blaming it on myself and that I should have done something differently and my parents wouldn't have, which now looking back on it, like that was not true at all.
But
right. But in that moment, it's what it was. And so there was just a lack of trust for people, which also made me very lonely. Yeah. Because I wouldn't be vulnerable. I wouldn't let people in. I would have a great time and I would smile and I would laugh and I would go to parties and we would have a great time. Like, you know, it was what it was. But particularly like if I'm looking at a relationship like our relationship now, I mean, nowhere remotely close. Sure. To being able to be vulnerable or being able to, you know, go to whether I'm mad or upset or sad or happy or whatever it is.
Yeah. And it's so important. Like that's like, you think about like the importance of having friendships like that. And what that does. I think it impacts if we are lacking in that area for a lot of men. I think it, and women too, probably it impacts like their relationship with their spouse because they don't have a healthy outlet or opportunity to connect with anybody outside of the person that they're married to.
And I also think, and correct me if I'm wrong, someone out there, right? Which they probably will if I am wrong. Is I think that this thing is really weird, but I feel like every female, every woman that I have ever met, right? I feel like it is harder for them, for females to make friends than males, than guys. Okay?
Harder for them to make friends with other females.
Yes. But I feel like every female I've ever met or talked to has like a best friend. And it's changed. Like I look at my wife. She has always had a best friend. It has changed multiple times throughout the years, but she's always had somebody that she was close with, that she would go to, that like they had this relationship, right? And I feel like a lot of guys don't have that, or the equivalent, and on a different level, because I feel like a lot of guys have best friends, but your best friend is like who you have the most fun with.
Yeah, not the kind of that's a great thing, I think, to go through, like identifying like what are the people in our life that we think are our best friends, and is that person actually a good friend, or is it the person is this my party buddy and I end up like they're causing more destructive things in my life. Because I think it's easier to connect with another guy over the party
Mhm.
than it is to sit in the room and talk about, this is what I'm going through, dude.
It's
This is what I'm
100%
feeling. It's
easier.
like nobody wants to go like do that because our insecurities, our whole thing goes on. Like we have all these like probably alarms in our brain, but like don't share this because then he's gonna think like he's gonna size you up this way, X, Y, and Z. So we just keep that all in, and all of our relationships are actually acquaintances, and they're people that we just like to have a good time with.
Right.
But when everything hits the fan, like a friend, a true friend, is with you and celebrating you and encouraging you and challenge you, not just in the parties, not just in the successes, not in the wins, but through the freaking storms.
Mm-hmm.
And like, if you don't, an acquaintance is not going to do that.
Yeah.
They're not going to be there for you when you're in the dungeon.
Yeah.
When you're in the shadows, when you're dark, when you're hurting. Like, that's not going to happen. And I feel bad for, I think, a lot of people, because I don't think a lot of people have those actual friends that are going to be in the foxhole with them,
right,
fighting with them, even when the crap is real.
Yeah, and we could get really, really, really deep into this conversation that honestly I'm not even sure I want to go, because to be completely honest with you, stuff like what we're talking about right now is where a lot of suicide comes from. Being alone. Feeling like you have no one that you can go to when things are really tough, or you have no one that will support you in that moment. And yeah, sure, I have a lot of people who I could go and party with, or I could go and do whatever with, but I don't have anybody to go to when it's miserable and terrible. And for a lot of
who's
people,
going to listen to me cry?
Exactly.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, that ends into suicidal thoughts.
Yeah.
And potentially actually taking that action, right?
Yeah.
And that goes really, really, really deep, really, really, really quickly. But like, let's talk about this for a second of like, what does that look like? Right? And what does it look like of, I think that, so to be vulnerable and actually have someone to be able to share that with, right? You have to be vulnerable and let go of some of those insecurities and that kind of thing, right? But in a response back to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that sometimes there are people who reach out and are seeking you out for like, help me, please. And how you respond has a really, really big impact, right? Because there's a big difference in being like, this is happening, this is miserable, this sucks, and somebody responding back and being like, this sucks, dude, I'm sorry.
Right.
Versus something else, right?
Yeah.
What does that look like even for you personally?
Yeah. I mean, I think in its best form, when I'm in that moment of somebody coming to me or an acquaintance or a friend is going through something.
No. Let's not talk about that. Let's do it the other way around. What are you looking for when you're going through a tough time? And going
that'd be the same answer applies.
Okay.
It is, I am, as cheesy as it's going to sound, I'm looking for someone that will respond in the way that I would see Jesus respond in the text. So I am looking for someone in that situation, one that will meet me where I am, will listen, like not judge me, guide me, give me wisdom and encouragement. And ultimately, what Jesus does more than anything is says that the thing that you are going through, the thing that you've done, X, Y, Z, is not the thing that defines you. He reminds people who they actually are. And in that moment of crisis, for me, what I need is I need to be seen, I need to be comforted, but I need to be reminded about who I am through him.
And whose you are.
Yeah.
Heard that before, right?
No.
Who I am and whose I am?
No, I never heard that before.
Really?
No.
You never
Is that
heard
a Southern thing?
I don't think it's a Southern. It might be. Drummer Matt, have you ever heard that before?
No, he's from Ohio, so.
Right. Wow. No, it was like a thing of like who I am, of, you know, me being me, and then whose I am, of like, gosh.
I know, I get it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, it is what it is, I guess.
No, I don't. Does that make sense though? Like
It does.
That's what I'm looking for. Like,
Well, my question was going to
I mean, that's the reality too. I should be honest. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, that's not, like, ideally, that's what I'm looking for. Sometimes I'm looking for somebody that's going to numb the pain with me.
Yeah. That's fair.
Like, I'm just looking for somebody like, dude, like, screw, yeah.
You ready for this? I think that right there is the difference between like a best friend and a friend. Is the person who knows which one is going to work in that moment, but also doesn't enable you in a crazy negative way. Because
like has that level of discernment.
Correct.
They see what you're going for and be like, I hear you, I'm with you, but we're going to go this direction.
Correct. Because sometimes, like for me, sometimes it is best of like, hey, let's talk about this. Let's pray. Let's do whatever it is. Like, go read this Bible verse. Like, go do this kind of stuff. And like,
sure,
that's cool. That's great.
Maybe, yeah.
Sometimes it's like, can we just go out to like a bar and get a drink?
Yeah.
Like, can we just go sit there and talk? Like,
yeah.
Or just like go sit there and like just not be alone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that there are levels obviously, and you have to build there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you get to a place of where you call somebody and based on what's going on, they can help discern where's going to be the best place that's going to have the biggest impact. That's when it's like, that's what I want.
Is there a way, I don't know if this is healthy or not, to like, so you have a list in your head of people that you know that you would call friends.
Yes.
Like a quick, like what? Like, would it be beneficial to hypothetically put yourself in situations and be like, would I reach out to them? So like the stupidest thing that I have is I remember with Facebook when it would pop up and be like, it's drummer Matt's birthday today.
Yeah.
And I would use that as a filter of whether I needed to delete them as friends on Facebook or not. Because it's like, if I was going to take the time to respond to them, and be like, hey, wish them a happy birthday, then I would say, like, oh, we're still friends on Facebook. Right. We're still Facebook friends. Right. And if I wouldn't, I'd be like, I should probably just unfriend them. Right. Like, why do I keep this? I got a couple thousand friends. Like, no, I don't. What is that? So I used to use that as a filter. Right. So would it be helpful? Is there any benefit to like going through? It's like, man, if I was going through this shit right now, sorry.
No, to apologize.
Would Taylor be a person that I could go to and talk to?
So here is my way of answering that question. Right? I don't put people to the test. No, I don't.
Right.
Right? And I also think that, obviously it takes time to get to that place of like, and I know who I would call if things are bad, right? But the real test for me, and this may sound crazy, here's the real test for me of the list of people that I give to my wife. That if something is wrong and she needs something, who do you call?
I feel like that was also ingrained in you as a child, because I remember you telling me a story about your dad had like an apocalyptic kind of survival plan that if
stop. My dad will get mad at you if we talk about it because people can't find out about his.
I'm not going to talk about all the things.
Right.
But you guys have a thing where if X happens, brothers coordinate.
It's real. It's real.
We triangulate.
It's honestly real.
We're going home.
Yeah, my dad's put together lots of plans. He has, but no, there is this thing of if something is wrong, then and you can't, and I'm unavailable for some reason, right? Then who do you call? And I think that if there is a person who like quote unquote gets onto that list of now, it's not just I'm going to trust you with my issues or my problems. Now I'm trusting you with my wife's issues and problems if they were to arise. Then it's like, it doesn't matter anymore. Like you're on that list and you're on like, you know what I mean? But I'm not going to like put people through a test to see if they can make it on that list. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Have you experienced like a friend in a group or whatever that you have found to actually be like what you would say is like unhealthy for you to be around?
Yes, absolutely.
What was that like? What was your process like? Or what did you do? Like, is that something that are you like how do you deal with that reality if it comes up in your friend circle or in your life?
Of being in an unhealthy relationship.
There's somebody in there that's like it's not bringing life to you.
Yeah.
And whether that's like an internal thing that
Yeah.
you feel like I feel a certain way when I'm in the room with them,
Yeah.
or it's like, hey, I have to like actually zoom out and look at it. It's like when I'm with this person,
Yeah.
like generally these are the things that happen.
Yeah.
Whether that's a behavior like going out, going too hard,
Mhm.
going to places you shouldn't be that are not going to be healthy,
Mhm.
being compromising yourself, I guess.
Yeah.
And like, how do you like? What is that like, and what is the process like?
Yeah. So, for me, if I feel like I have that realization about someone, then my general rule of thumb is be cordial, but I'm not going to seek you out.
Mm. So, okay.
I'm not going to be a jerk, and I'm not going to like, I'm not going to be rude or mean to you, but I'm also not going to seek you out. And I think that there's this idea, we've talked. I already talked about how relationships are two-way streets and all these kinds of things, right? And I think that there's this thing of. I also think that I have a different mindset about this than some people, and I think it's just like it's like me as a person, not like something I learned or like I think it's this thing of where I have this like innate desire for like efficiency of like I don't want to waste my time on things that I don't need to. And so in my head, and I don't mean for this to sound like cold or rude, and that's not my intention. But I used to not to be this way, but now I don't have time for it. And if I'm surrounding myself or seeking out or putting myself around people who aren't good for me or aren't good for my family, then I'm just not gonna do it. But like I'm just not gonna put myself in that.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna put myself in the situation. And I think that that's a lot like easier for me to say than for a lot of people to do. And I also think it can be very, very difficult when you feel like all you have are unhealthy relationships around you. Because if you're like, I just stop seeking all of these, then who do I have?
Right.
And that can be extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, it's like the same thing applies like if you think back before, I mean, for you, you had been in middle school before you met Brooke. But like this idea, I think about like
we actually met in elementary school.
Okay. Well, when you guys were start dating?
No, high school.
Okay. So middle school would still apply. This idea of like if you're single or you feel alone, you're always looking for like, I want to have a girlfriend. Like as an immature man, I feel like that's a thing. And it's like in the spot of like, or I guess what was popping in my head was you're surrounded and you don't have by all unhealthy influences in relationships. And then it's like, all I want to do is have a best friend.
Yeah. And
then you take one of those unhealthy, and you're just like, well, I'll cling on to this so that I have a person.
Yeah.
Even though that's not the right person for you.
Yeah.
That's not the healthiest person for you.
Can I just be really real with this situation for a second? If you are sitting there and you're going, everyone around me is unhealthy. Right?
Well,
no, I'm just saying in general.
Yeah.
The problem isn't the people that are around you. The problem is you.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just being honest. The problem is you.
Yeah.
If you feel like you are only surrounded by people who are unhealthy or enable you or they're leading you down the wrong path, and that's all you have, and you don't have anybody to go to when you are vulnerable, when you're down, when you're whatever, that is a problem with you. And that sounds really, really harsh. And it is, to be completely honest, because sometimes you need that. You need a harsh, like, oh, it is me. Like, that's a realization that somebody has to have. I had it.
Yeah. And that's hard for people.
Yes.
To see, like, if you go into every workplace and there's an issue every time, it's like, sometimes it's like, maybe it's you. Or in every relationship, and it becomes so how do you work on that? If you are that person who's like, and you have the spot being like, oh my gosh, I feel like everybody's always wrong, and then you hear Taylor talk to you, and you say, oh, I think maybe the issue, there's something inside of me that I need to work on and address. Like, where do you begin to address that? Because if I don't fix if I'm not in a good place internally, I can't be a good friend to anybody. I can't be a good husband.
Yeah.
I can't be a good father. So like, where do you, like, if you're saying like that, like, where do you start with that? Like, where does growing start with that?
Yeah. So I would say 3 places. I'll give you a list of 3, right? Number 1 would just be the Bible in general. There are a lot of different places you can go. If you're looking for how you should treat other people, then just go read the Gospels and look at how Jesus treated other people. Just like start there and just, that's all you need to know, right? The Bible, your faith, that kind of thing. I think the second place would be and a lot of people, I'm telling you, I'm going to say this and people are going to be like, oh, telling you, because that's what a lot of people, their reaction is. But my answer is go read some books, right? Exactly. People don't like to read. People don't want to read. People, whatever. I don't care what the excuse is.
Yeah.
But people don't want to read. But there are a lot of really great books out there on how to better yourself, how to be a better person, how to win friends and influence people. Like, I don't actually enjoy reading that book. I think it's whatever. We can go into that later. But it's a good title of a book that you can read if you're looking for friends, right? Yeah. And the third place would be, like, we go back to this iron sharpens iron is a two-way street, right? You have to seek people out. Seek somebody out that you look at and you go, I want what they have.
And
Seek them out.
Yeah. And go into that interaction, like, not just wanting to talk about yourself.
Correct.
Like, go in and be like, what is that thing? What is that spark about them? That divine thing about them. Like, and learn about them. Yes. Ask them questions. And they will probably ask you questions. Like, that's how you get to know somebody. 100%. Be genuinely curious, not just be like, I want to put myself in this social status. I want to run with this group. Right. So I'm going to figure out how I can do the things that this group does, or say the things and look like I'm supposed to be in this party and go through it. And like, that's where you're like, that's like the fakest thing in the world. You see people just like, you don't actually belong here with this. Like,
an example of this is like in the business world, right? Gotten DMs, gotten emails. I've sent DMs, emails, text messages, whatever, of like, hey, I've got a couple questions. Is there any way I could just get like a couple minutes of your time and just like run some things through with you, right? Can I just get a couple minutes of your time, right? Don't do that. Just don't do it. It shouldn't work. And if anybody's actually like worth it, then they maybe not, but a lot of them will just say no or not respond at all if you send that out, because all you're doing is trying to extract value, not add any value. And it's the same thing with relationships and the same thing with people, like what you're talking about. Go into the relationship looking to provide value, not extract value. And what you'll find is that the more value that you provide, the more value you're going to extract back.
Yeah. And that's the same thing you talked about with the two-way street thing. Like, you had these people in your lives, I'm sure that you have specifically, that you felt have just been like takers.
Yes. 100%.
Nobody wants to be around a taker.
Right.
They want to be around somebody that's kind of like coming with something to the table.
Right.
And like, we've all had those people like, man, it's like, I love you, man. I love you, dude. But then they call me and it's like, they're like saying like, hey, just gonna come over. And it's like, I gotta like strap on like whatever.
Whatever.
No, like, you gotta like kind of prepare yourself for the things that I know that this person will walk in the door and I do care about them. Right. But I know what they're gonna do is they're gonna come and they're gonna vomit.
Right.
Everything that's going on that's wrong in their life, why it's everybody else's fault, why it's the system's fault, while nobody's understanding them. And basically they're going to talk about the toughest parts of their situation while taking no ownership of it, no accountability. And people like that, although like I care and love for them, like that is hard to be around.
Yes.
And like, don't be that person.
Like, if you are listening to us talk about right now, and there are people in your life who are genuinely toxic to be around, and they're not a healthy relationship, they're not good for you, just don't be around them anymore.
So we call that a boundary.
Yes.
So
just don't do it anymore.
Well, how do you do that? So that's one of those things. Though it's like it's easy to be like, well, just stop it.
Yeah.
If we know like you're a smoker, well, just quit smoking.
Right.
Talk to the people about boundaries
Yes.
and what are some things that they can do. Let's talk about it. You don't have to like
No.
like what are some things that we can do to set up boundaries that protect us
Mhm.
and protect the other people too. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I think so. A big boundary that I have had to work on, and I feel like I'm still working on, but I'm getting much better. And I feel like a lot of people need to work on just in life, but it's very, very, very applicable here in what we're talking about right now. Is just the ability to say no.
I mean, yeah.
That should be a boundary in your life, but it should be a big boundary when you're talking about relationships. Is you do have the ability to say no, and you don't have to be a jerk about it. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to be mean about it
Or over-explain it.
Cory Jones,
Working on it.
right? But you can just say no, and I think the big thing is that here is a litmus test. I will give you a legitimate litmus test to see how good of a friend somebody is.
Okay.
Right? If somebody asks you to do something and you say no, if they say, okay, they're probably a great friend.
Yeah.
If they ask you for justification,
Why?
why? Why can't you do this? Why? If they ask you for justification, Matt and I have talked about this about a different situation.
So,
like a completely different situation.
Mhm.
But justification is not like I would say it like this if I was talking about myself, right? Justification is not a me problem, it's a you problem. Okay? And just apply that to people around you. Like, why do I need to justify it? Like why
Yeah.
I'm saying no. And
Yeah.
I think that there are healthy and unhealthy versions of that.
Sure.
Absolutely. Just like there is pretty much anything.
Yeah.
Right? But I think that is honestly a very good litmus test of one, of a few, of many. I don't know. Whatever the right saying is.
Yeah.
Maybe, well, you just talked about disengaging from toxic relationships, and something that I've struggled with is the underlying thought of, is my presence in my friends' lives supposed to bring them closer to Jesus? And if I'm the only person in their life that has a relationship with Jesus and I'm now going away from them, am I abandoning them and leaving them without hope?
Yeah.
Or is that an unnecessary pressure I'm putting on myself to stay in a toxic relationship?
That's interesting. I think that's like I think I've used that too sometimes. And if I'm being really honest, I think sometimes I've used that to justify staying in an unhealthy relationship.
Yes.
That is not like, because the reality is, if I am in there keeping a relationship with them
Mhm.
to bring them closer to Christ, the fruit of that should be that they are getting closer to Christ. And they're seeing something different in me.
And you are too.
And I am too. Yeah. Yeah. I think that I have been in spots with people, and I've received this from other, like, I've heard this, like, I mean, I think specifically I just say it's like from my dad at times, being like challenging me on that and not wanting to hear it, because it's like, actually, I don't want, this person is my party friend.
Yeah.
I don't want to sacrifice that. And I would say like, well, maybe just my presence around them eventually will lead them to Christ.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what is my presence around them actually showing them?
Mhm.
And I think that for me personally, in times I've been like, no, I actually haven't been acting like Christ around them. I'm using them as an outlet for my behavior or my thing that I want to do. And then kind of like being cowardice.
Yeah.
And not addressing the fact, and not because I wasn't like holding them accountable.
Yeah.
Or challenging them to see something different.
Yeah.
I don't know if that applies directly to what your question is, or what you had dealt with, Matt, but for me, as like I wrestled with those same questions.
Yeah.
And I think that
I can give an answer that's very similar to what you said, but I'm going to word it differently.
Cool.
Right? Of if you do not want to stop being friends with someone because you are the example of Christ in their life, but you want to not be friends with them, then I can tell you you're probably not being a very good example of Christ in their life, and you should probably walk away anyway, because something is happening in that relationship to make it toxic, and something is happening in that relationship to be unhealthy. And if you are actually 100% the example of Jesus Christ in that relationship, then it won't be like that.
And I think it's good to know too that and recognize the fact that like the presence of God exists outside of us.
Correct.
Actually. And it's not like if we need to, like Pastor Jason always talks about this too, of like you can keep loving people, but sometimes you need to love people from a distance. Because I need to make sure that I can get healthy so that I'm not destructive to myself or other relationships.
I think that's really interesting, because I would actually love to do a whole nother episode on this topic that we're talking about right this second, of the limits that we put on God.
Mm.
God doesn't have limits, but we put a lot of limits on him.
Right.
Of if we ever find ourselves saying the only way this person is going to come into a healthy relationship with Jesus is because of us or because of me,
right?
That is unhealthy from the very beginning, from the very get-go.
Yeah.
That's very unhealthy. And it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try or pursue those people, but God's plan is not dependent on you for this other person way over here, right? And I think that something that is just to keep in mind is the best way, in my opinion, maybe I'm wrong, and please correct me if I am. I believe that the best way that you can be an example of Jesus to somebody else is by being an example. And it sounds really weird and stupid and cheesy, but the best way you can do that is by being an example and living your life in the best way that you can.
Mm-hmm.
And if that means loving someone from a distance, being cordial but not pursuing them, right? Like loving them from a distance, then if that friendship is supposed to result in something, if that is a part of the plan, then that person is going to look back at you and see something and go, I want that. Now I'm going to seek that out.
Yeah. And maybe even that distance allows the opportunity where it's like we talked about it in the past about this desire to fix something or fix people, which any relationship you go into thinking like, yeah, I can know about all X, Y, and Z going on, but like, I'm pretty sure I can fix that. Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck, because you're not going to create a change in that person.
Yeah.
The only thing that really is going to change that person is the love of God.
Yeah.
The love of Jesus.
And I think that we've also talked about in the past of like mental fortitude and how everything I believe is a decision. One decision is everything, right? And we have to make it a whole bunch of times, but getting up early in the morning, if you want to do that, that's a decision to get up early in the morning, or multiple decisions to actually set the alarm, go to bed at a reasonable time, not get hammered the night before, and get up early in the morning, right? It's like 5 decisions, but it's still a decision, right? If you want to work out and you want to be healthier, that is a decision to go to the gym. It's a decision to eat healthier. All of those things. It's all singular decisions that come together in a chain of events, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the same principle and the same thing applies to relationships. Of it's just a decision of how you're going to treat somebody and how close or how much you're going to seek somebody out. But it's much harder to do. And I want to realize that. It's much harder to do because now there are other people involved.
Yeah.
And we don't want to hurt people. We don't want to,
we also don't want to lose our status with those people.
Correct.
I think we started going on this topic. So if we're going to love somebody from a distance, then that means inevitably we have to have some sort of, not even a boundary, because that could be like a block, but like some guardrails, some limitations, some things that we put into place to help us maintain that distance in a healthy way. So bringing up like, what does that actually look like?
Yeah. And
I can share for myself, like there are a couple relationships that I have with people that I do love deeply. A lot of history with them. In those relationships, one specifically, I have a time limit. And generally, I'm good. Like, I think when I go and I'm going to interact, like, it will stay. Generally, we have a really good chance of having a positive interaction if I keep it to 2 hours.
Wow. Interesting. I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying, like, interesting.
Yeah. So it's like, because I think about, like, once we get here, we're going to participate in certain behaviors. Maybe it's comfortable. We like to share a drink together. We're going to hang out. And then inevitably, I know we have a lot of history and things we're going to talk about. And if I go beyond that 2 hour window, I open up opportunities and doors for more time, more drinks, for being real, and more, like, there's more opportunities to kind of pick at scabs.
Yeah. No,
and
it's
wounds
totally
that are
real.
still there. And so not that those issues don't eventually need to be addressed, but for me right now to maintain a healthy distance and love them and not just go to confrontation or that 2 hour window seems to be a good pocket. And I believe personally, like, my strategy, like, long term with that is, like, I want to keep consistent in that and leave the door open to eventually there's an opportunity where it's like, I don't have to pursue the healing right away all the time. But the door's open and that maybe they will bring up, hey, I'd like to talk about some of these things. I'd like to go through. And I would rather have that conversation in the first 2 hours of us hanging out.
Yeah.
When that happens, than hour 5.
Yeah. I love how intentional that is. And I also love the fact that something that's really, really important about these boundaries that we're kind of digging into more and getting into, right, is that boundaries can't be set on other people. They can only be set for yourself.
Correct.
Right? I can't control.
I don't tell this person that I have a 2 hour.
Right. Well, now anybody who listens is going to be like,
how long is Cory spending?
For longer than 2 hours, right? But no, but you can only set boundaries or be intentional with things that you can control. You can't control other people's thoughts or what other people do or anything like that. And so I think that it's this thing of what boundaries do I need to set for myself, not on someone else. And then once you set a boundary, right, it's not a boundary unless you actually be intentional about respecting it.
Yeah.
If you don't respect that boundary and you're like, I'm only going to hang out with this person for 2 hours, but then you get 3.5 hours in and you're like, man.
I've lived it too. This has been a couple years of being, like, having this kind of this boundary set up. And some of the times when I, like, lost focus, lost discipline on it, sometimes it's not that bad. Sometimes it's actually good. And sometimes it's like, man, there are parts of me that come out that I don't want to have to come out. Yeah. And I have to remind myself, it's like, nope, that boundary's in place because it's what's most healthy for you and the other person right now. Right. And I pray, I believe that, like, that can change. 100%. But right now, I have to operate within that boundary for me to maintain any sort of healthy relationship and any hope of that relationship growing and healing and going to the next level. Right.
Man. Boundaries.
It's okay. I think it's good sometimes, though. I love the ability and that we allow, like, a space to just say something and then sit with it. Because it's, like, uncomfortable. And sometimes like, well, what are you going to say next? What are you going to? And it's like, you don't have to go anywhere. You can just be here. We can just be in that moment for a second. And I believe, like, whoever else is listening, it's like they can sit in that moment too. Yeah. And process and listen. Yeah. What's the voice? What's the still small voice? What's the Spirit saying to you?
Yeah, I think that in this moment and in that moment, like, I think what I'm kind of going through in my mind right now is, like, it's this weird thing, where we're talking about boundaries and we're talking about setting them and not setting them on other people and following them and all these different kinds of things, right? But I was literally just thinking of how thankful and grateful I am for the people who are in my life, that all of them are the people who I would call my closest friends, are the people who actually respect my boundaries. Right? And I was sitting here thinking of, like, I almost feel like we're talking about boundaries as like this hard stop.
Yeah.
And there's something that like almost holds you back. And they're so far opposite. And I've talked with people about this, but there's a pastor. We're gonna have him on as a guest at some point on this episode or on this podcast. His name is Brandon. And I love Brandon to death. I genuinely think he is a fantastic person. And I would love to get closer with him. But Brandon was preaching one Sunday. And he was kind of talking about boundaries. And he gave this example of a fence around a playground. And he gave this example of how a lot of times we look at kind of, he was actually talking about it into like the boundaries that God puts in the Bible of don't do this, do this. Like, let's love people, let's not kill people. Like things like that, but in a bigger scale. And he talked about this fence around a playground, about how the fence around a playground is not there to keep kids back. Like, it's not there to hold them back. It's not there to limit their fun. It's not there to stop them from enjoying themselves. It's there to protect them. It's there so that they don't run off of the slide into the middle of a road and get hit by a car.
Sure.
Like, that's why the fence is there.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that that also changes a lot of how you think and perceive about boundaries, of where when I'm setting these, they're not there to keep me from something. They're not there to hold me back. They're not there to stop me from having fun.
Yeah.
They're there to protect me. They're there to protect my family.
Yeah.
And when you get to a place where you're able to start surrounding yourself with people who respect those boundaries, that is where a whole lot of good comes from.
Right.
And I'm just really grateful for that.
Yeah. Because people that respect your boundaries ultimately they're like respecting you and they're showing like love and care for you. And they're not just like somebody that wants you to break your boundary only wants you to do that because they want you to come tag along with them on their thing, that their boundaries are different.
Right.
Which is okay. They can have different boundaries. Sure. But to be able to be in a relationship, a friendship, where someone says like, hey man, I know that you've kind of set this up and I'm going to work with you towards your goal and support that. Very special.
Yes.
Very cool.
It is. So what we got?
I feel like there are other things we could talk about, like what would Jesus say? What would he do? But yeah, I've got a peace in my heart right now about this conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that I will walk away from this with a lot to think about. And I think specifically just when it's like, what are my boundaries? Are they healthy? Do I have any? Do I need to create some or create some more? And kind of look and see like who are the people that really care about those and support those. And I guess leaving this too, I would just say like I'm so thankful to have a relationship like I have with you. And really it just like I feel like I have more close friends than I deserve. And I feel really blessed to have that in my life, because it's through those relationships that's where like you get more value.
Yeah.
Because you have shared experiences.
Yeah.
And people that you're doing life with.
Why do you feel like you have more close friends than you deserve? That phrase. Why do you feel that way?
To be honest, it's probably just one of those things you say because you're aware that there are people out there there are going to be people that listen to this that don't feel like they have any close friends. And so it's probably some BS that I just threw out.
So you don't actually feel that way?
No, I think if I was being honest, like I think I'm a good friend. I think looking at that scripture that says, if you're friendly, you'll have friends. Like I feel like I exhibit those traits. And I think it's because of that I have close friends. So it was just, so it's weird to say, but like, I do think I deserve the friends that I have.
Yeah.
I think I've earned their trust. And I think I've shown that I care. And I think that not in the same way that Jesus laid down his life. There's no greater love than to lay down your life for a friend.
Yeah.
He is the ultimate example of that. But if I was looking at what selfless love looks like and what it looks like to lay down your life for somebody else, not to say I will take a bullet necessarily for you, but to say when you're in a place of need, I will be there.
Yeah.
When you're hurting, I will be there. When I'm hurting, like when you ask me to do something that's kind of uncomfortable for me,
Yeah.
where I'd be easier, like, but I know it's the right thing to do to support you. Like, I'm going to answer that call. I feel like I have, not perfectly, but I have shown, like, I have laid my life down for people that I care, my friends.
Yeah.
And I know that my friends have laid their lives down to support me. And so because I surround myself with people that have reciprocated that, like, I feel blessed to have close friends, and maybe I deserve it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that what you just said should be like put up on a plaque in terms of like, it's really, really good when you think about it of, like a close friend or a best friend isn't necessarily someone that will take a bullet for me. It's going to be someone that's there for me in my lowest time. And I think that, you can have this idea of what a best friend is supposed to be, or what a close friend is supposed to be, or what it's supposed to look like. And I think that looks different for different people depending on what they need and who they are and all that kind of stuff. But I just think that you're a great friend and you do deserve the people that you have, and you deserve more. And I think that there are a lot of people who, if something was happening, then they would call you. And I think you have an amazing gift to be down to earth and talk to people, but still lead them towards Jesus. And I think that a lot of people out there, if you listen to this podcast, you understand that if you really listen, Cory is actually weaving in scripture in a lot of things that he says, but he's not talking about it in a I know this or I'm better than you kind of way. It's just who you are. And I think your ability to do that shows a lot. And a lot of people are looking for that and seeking that. And I appreciate you, man.
Nicest thing Taylor ever said.
But I think it's just something of this. I think this, we've talked about this before, like having this peace, but I think I just have this extreme like gratefulness right now, after this conversation for you and for the people around me. And I think that it's also different because I feel like I have been in a place where I didn't have anything like this, right? Yeah. Nowhere close to it. And I know that it sucks, and I know what being alone feels like. And I'm not just saying that. I have a story that if anybody out there wants to know about it, just DM me or ask me and I'll tell it to you. But I think now being in this place, and I think that it's really important. And if you feel like you're in this place of having unhealthy friends, like, I think the first most important thing to know is like, you're not stuck there. You're not alone in that. Like, you can have better relationships. You can deserve better relationships, and there are just decisions and changes that you have to make. And I think if you're willing to do those, then
work on yourself, the rest will follow.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
I love you, man.
Love you too.
Love you, everybody. Got any one-liners? Or we called it.
We're about to find out how good of friends we are right now. There's a chance we lost that. There's a chance.